This is Today As It Happened. Good Tuesday evening to you. I'm Andrew Rafferty here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. Let's jump right in. Minnesota remains tense after days of confrontations between federal immigration agents and protesters. Agents fired tear gas in Minneapolis Monday as crowds gathered around officers questioning a man. Hundreds also protested outside Somali-run businesses in St. Cloud after ICE officers arrived there. The state of Minnesota, along with Minneapolis and St. Paul, are suing the Trump administration to try to halt the surge of immigration officers. And Iranians were able to make phone calls out of the country for the first time in days after authorities restored some communications following a deadly crackdown on nationwide protests. Activists say at least 646 people have been killed and nearly 11,000 detained during 2 weeks of unrest. Witnesses describe a heavy security presence in Tehran with burned government buildings and smashed ATMs. Top Iranian officials, including the president and foreign minister, joined pro-government rallies in Tehran on Monday, seen here, one of several pro-regime rallies that were also held across Iran. And President Trump is not sitting by quietly as Iranian officials crack down on those protests. Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George, he joins me now live from Capitol Hill. And Joe, the president threatening to slap a heavy penalty on any of those countries doing business with Iran during this tumultuous period. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, good morning, Andrew. It's one of the developments on this front that we've been tracking over the course of the last 24 hours or so. Which direction will the president pursue? Will we be potentially talking about military strikes in the near future, or will diplomacy win the day? For the time being, economic pressure seems to be the strategy of the president. Late yesterday, the president took to Truth Social to announce that he's instituting new tariffs on countries that do trade with Iran. Effective immediately, the president wrote, any country doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will pay a tariff of 25% on any and all business being done with the United States. Now, the White House is leaving both doors open, right? Door one, diplomacy. Door two, military intervention. But as the president told reporters on Air Force One Sunday, there may not be enough time between now and however long it takes to get some sort of deal done with Iran before the U.S. military needs to take action. I mean, remember, there is a human life component, a human component to all of this, and the loss of life that we have seen in Tehran and Iran reported out. And it's difficult to get information out of Iran, right? Internet blockages and the like. The Associated Press reporting activists who are saying north of 600 people have died in recent days because of these latest uprisings here. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, walked reporters through on Monday the president's thinking at this time.
I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president. He's told all of you last night that what you're hearing publicly from the Iranian regime is quite differently from the messages the administration is receiving privately, and I think the president has an interest in exploring those messages. However, with that said, the president has shown he's unafraid to use military options if and when he deems necessary, and nobody knows that better than Iran.
For instance, the President of the United States ordered strikes against Iran's nuclear program last year. He ordered participating in the killing of General Soleimani during his first term. This is a president who has not shied away when necessary military conflict with Iran, and that, of course, comes with risks. Anytime an American president is threatening military action in Iran, there's a chance of retaliation from the Iranian military, especially in the direction of American military bases stationed in the Middle East. Iranian officials have once again emphasized in recent hours their desire for peace, but also said that they're preparing for the possibility of war should it reach that magnitude. So we'll be watching this throughout the day. Andrew, we're always keeping an eye on the president's calendar whenever we're talking about the threats of military intervention. He's still scheduled to go to Detroit, Michigan in a little bit for an economic speech. We'll see if the president has any update on Iran when he speaks to reporters, when and if he speaks to reporters a little bit later today.
Yeah, and Joe, the other story that is reverberating, at least around Washington and beyond, is news of that investigation into the head of the Fed, Jerome Powell. What more can you tell us this morning?
And to your point of and beyond, you have governors of central banks around the world issuing a remarkable joint statement in recent hours defending the independence of the Federal Reserve of the United States. Central bankers of Europe, of Australia, leaders across Europe, they're standing in solidarity this morning with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. All of this, remember, started late Sunday night with a remarkable video, pre-recorded message from Federal Reserve Chairman Powell confirming subpoenas received on Friday related to the testimony that he gave Congress last year involving the construction project of the Federal Reserve headquarters in Washington. But what was remarkable about the video is Powell looked into the camera and then essentially said that this wasn't about what he said or didn't say to Congress. This was about the independence of the Fed. This was about longstanding disagreements over interest rate policies with President Trump. And that resulted in a litany of reaction, plethora of reaction on both sides of the aisle in our nation's capital. Democrats responding, as you might suspect, but a number of Republicans have also taken issue with this new investigation into Jerome Powell, including Senator Kennedy of Louisiana, who said this to reporters late yesterday.
I know Chairman Powell very well. I will be stunned. I will be shocked if he has done anything wrong. I understand that some folks have gone on television and have accused the chairman of perjury. This is America. You can say what you think. But a perjury allegation, particularly to the United States Congress, is a serious allegation. It's serious as 4 heart attacks and a stroke. And if you make an allegation like that, by God, you better be prepared to back it up.
The Republican senator from Louisiana there. Now, we've heard a lot from the Fed side of this, from Jerome Powell's view of all of this. What about the Department of Justice? What about the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., which is investigating this charge? We have a social media post from the U.S. Attorney in D.C., Jeanine Pirro. You may remember her from her days hosting Fox News programs. She wrote this. I'm going to read it in its entirety because it provides more perspective from the U.S. Attorney's side of things. The U.S. Attorney's Office contacted the Federal Reserve on multiple occasions, Pirro writes, to discuss cost overruns in the chairman's congressional testimony, but were ignored, necessitating the use of the legal process, which is not a threat. The word indictment, Pirro writes, has come out of Mr. Powell's mouth, no one else's. None of this would have happened if they had just responded to our outreach. This office makes decisions based on the merits, nothing more, nothing less. We agree with the chairman of the Federal Reserve that no one is above the law, and that is why we expect his full cooperation. Again, Chairman Powell's term as chairman of the Federal Reserve set to expire in the coming months. President Trump has said that he's continuing the interview process for his replacement. But Powell does have the option to potentially stay on the board that makes interest rates decisions, may not be leading the board, but on the board. This investigation has raised new questions if Powell will actually leave the Fed in the coming months or not. We'll follow that reaction throughout the day and any more additional reaction we get out of Capitol Hill, Andrew.
All right, Joe St. George, our deputy political director. Also worth noting, just moments ago, new numbers on inflation showing that they are mostly unchanged in the month of December. Of course, that playing such a key part in those rate hike decisions. Joe, we're going to continue to monitor that as well as everything else we just went through from Capitol Hill. Joe, thank you. And coming up on Today As It Happened.
The Fed controls short-term rates, and there is a risk that if short-term rates come down too much too fast, that could actually stoke inflation and lead long-term rates, which are more set by investor expectations, to go up.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories. A significant update on that death toll from the protests taking place in Iran. According to the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency, at least 2,000 people have been killed in those nationwide protests. President Trump has canceled meetings with Iranian officials and has told protesters, quote, help is on the way. The new numbers come as some communication from inside the country was restored following the crackdown on the protests. Activists also say nearly 11,000 people have been detained during the 2 weeks of unrest. Witnesses describe a heavy security presence in Tehran with burned government buildings and smashed ATMs. And Russia launched another massive attack on Ukraine overnight, firing almost 300 drones and 25 missiles at 8 regions. The strikes killed 4 people and left hundreds of thousands without power as temperatures plunged to 10 degrees Fahrenheit in Kyiv. This is the second major bombardment in 4 days, with Russia again targeting Ukraine's power grid. The attacks come as the Trump administration tries to advance peace negotiations. Ukraine's president says Russia is weaponizing winter to break public resistance as the war approaches its 4-year mark. And Americans could finally get some relief from those high borrowing costs this year. The Federal Reserve is projected to cut interest rates by 0.75 percentage point in 2026, that according to Bankrate's annual forecast. That would bring rates to just 0.5 percentage point away from where they were before the pandemic. The Fed has already cut rates by 1.75 percentage points since September of last year, but experts warn lower rates could come with trade-offs. Well, what might be some of those trade-offs? Ted Rossman is the senior industry analyst for Bankrate. He joins me now to talk more about what we could see in the months ahead. Thank you for being here. Good morning to you. We got some new numbers out just a short time ago. Inflation easing slightly. We know that that's a key factor in what goes into setting some of these rates. So what is your overall assessment of what we're going to see in 2026?
I believe we'll see 3 quarter-point cuts this year. That would be a fairly measured pace, very much in line with what we saw last year as well. As the saying goes, sometimes rates take the elevator up and the stairs down, because remember in 2022 and 23, the Fed pushed rates higher by 5.25 points in an effort to restrict the economy and fight inflation. Since then, they've cut 1.75 points. If we get another 0.75 points in cuts this year, then that's a cumulative 2.5 on the way down. That would basically unwind roughly half of the increase. We're getting back to normal, to summarize. Rates were really, really low for a long time, and then they were really high for a couple of years. And now we're starting to get closer to that equilibrium or that neutral level.
So perhaps no one wants to see those rates come down more than President Trump. What are some of the scenarios that could lead to lower rates this year?
The Fed controls short-term rates, and there is a risk that if short-term rates come down too much too fast, that could actually stoke inflation and lead long-term rates, which are more set by investor expectations, to go up. So that would be important for mortgage rates, for example, because the Fed has more control over credit cards, home equity lines of credit. Bank accounts tend to track more or less in line with what the Fed's doing. Longer term rates like mortgages are more set by the market. So the president can appoint a new Fed chair very soon. Jerome Powell's term ends in May. If he tries to pick a loyalist who's going to lower rates by, let's say, 3 percentage points on day one, well, that actually could have unintended consequences to undermining Fed independence, stoking longer term inflation. And also, it's a 12-member committee that votes on interest rate decisions. So it's actually not really something that 1 or 2 people can feasibly do. These are all reasons why, despite some of the political bluster, I think it's going to be more of a slow and steady decline.
And you mentioned mortgage rates there. What should potential home buyers be on the lookout for in the months ahead?
Mostly good news, I would say. Mortgage rates are coming down. I suppose the not so great part is that they're still a lot higher than in recent memory. We're not going back to the 3 or 4% range that we saw in 2020 and 21, but we've come well down from the 8% that we were seeing a couple of years ago and the 7% that we were seeing 1 year ago. Right now, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate is about 6.25%. According to our Bankrate data. Some estimates actually put it a little below 6. We're going to refresh our numbers tomorrow. We do it every week. So that this week has actually brought some interesting developments. We might soon go below 6 for the first time since the summer of 2022. That's a bit of a psychological breakthrough. It's also a financial savings for someone who might be able to lower their monthly payment by a couple $100s versus when rates were in the sevens. That's going to start to unstick some activity, get some buyers in off the sidelines, maybe even encourage some refinancing activity for those who bought in the last couple of years. It's not going to change the calculation for someone who's hugging a 3% mortgage that they secured in late 2020, but it is slowly leading to some activity in the housing market.
The narrative, I think, often becomes that lower rates are always a good thing for consumers. You laid out some of the ways in which they could be beneficial, especially for home buyers or some people in that sort of situation. But what are some of the other side effects we should be on the lookout for if things do start to trend downward over the next 12 months?
Slow, steady declines in interest rates would be a good thing in our current environment. That would suggest that inflation's coming down, the economy's relatively stable. If rates fall a lot this year, that's probably either because something went wrong with the Fed or the economy, like if the job market really took a turn for the worse, or there's a bad recession. To be clear, that's not our base case. We actually think the economy is going to remain in pretty good shape. We'll avoid a recession. But in other words, there's a little bit of be careful what you wish for with interest rates. Interest rates went down a ton during the Great Recession, and that was for unpleasant reasons. They went down a lot during the pandemic. Same thing. I mean, bad news can create lower rates. Right now, we want to find that equilibrium. Rates have been a bit high the past few years to fight inflation. So if we kind of continue to slowly come back to more of a normal, that's the Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold kind of scenario. It's been a wild 15 or 20 years for interest rates. We've seen just some extraordinarily low rates because of crises. We've seen the worst inflation in 40 years and really high rates. Right now, we're trying to find that balance somewhere in the middle.
All right, Ted Rossman, he's a senior industry analyst for Bankrate. Thank you for your insights.
No problem, thanks.
Straight ahead on Today As It Happened.
What happened at a Target store in Minneapolis where 2 U.S. citizens were arrested by immigration enforcement officers? I'm Patrick Terpstra. Ahead, what we've uncovered about this confrontation that went viral online.
Thanks for staying with us on Today As It Happened. I'm Andrew Rafferty with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
Shame! Shame! Shame!
Hundreds of people continue to clash daily with federal immigration agents in Minneapolis. This morning, President Trump once again called Renee Good, the woman killed by ICE, a, quote, professional agitator. And he says all the patriots of ICE want to do is remove criminals from your neighborhood. This comes one day after the state of Minnesota and cities Minneapolis and St. Paul announced a lawsuit against the Trump administration to try to halt the surge of ICE officers. And that surge of federal agents has led to more than 24 arrests, according to DHS, has led to more than 2,000 arrests, according to DHS. Those are new numbers out this morning with the agents deployed amid pockets of that unrest. Yesterday, we showed you video of agents breaking down doors of homes and pepper spraying people from the window of their car. Now we are getting a look at an intense confrontation, including one that unfolded at a Target store. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra, he joins me now. And Patrick, you've been looking into this video. What more can you tell us?
Well, of course, so many videos have emerged all around the Minneapolis area, and these really caught our attention because they involve 2 young men who are suddenly approached by a bunch of federal agents, including the top Customs and Border Patrol official, Greg Bovino. On the ground in Minneapolis, Scripps News captured Chief Border Patrol agent Greg Bovino watching a crowd of protesters. It was the day after the shooting of Renee Good.
I'm not doing all right. Back up. Yo.
Bovino would show up just hours later at a suburban Target in an incident where citizen video quickly spread online.
Oh, back up. I'm walking here.
Video shows Bovino and other agents approaching the store. Bovino and a second agent began taking pictures of the person filming them.
Go ahead, take a pic right there.
Another agent asks a Target employee in an orange vest tracking them with a camera phone if he's a U.S. citizen.
Hey, don't touch him. Don't touch him. What are you doing?
The man doesn't answer the question and responds with profanity, walking backward into the store.
Look at that. Look, 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 look.
Where agents tackle him to the ground and handcuff him, along with a second worker also arrested. As agents take them away, the pair identify themselves as Jonathan Aguilar Garcia and Christian Miranda Romano. As agents force Garcia into a van, he says he's a U.S. citizen.
I'm literally a U.S. citizen. Give us a phone number. I'm literally a U.S. citizen. I literally have my passport.
The Department of Homeland Security says one of the individuals was arrested for assaulting federal law enforcement officers. No charges have been filed. Another video posted online shows Garcia released hours later in the parking lot of a Walmart.
You okay, man? No, I'm not okay.
Garcia's sister posting to Facebook, he is injured and got his head hit, but otherwise he is safe. Romano sharing a picture to social media of himself holding a plastic bag with belongings, captioned, "I just got released. Thanks for the support." And Target did not respond to any of our inquiries about this, which is pretty unusual. Target oftentimes does respond to media inquiries, but this is really a tough thing for Target. Of course, it's headquartered in Minnesota, and I just interviewed a state representative whose district includes the Target where this whole thing went down, and he was saying he has been in touch with Target and says that they need to be making a public statement about this and actually refusing entry to Customs and Border Patrol.
We'll be right back to continue our rundown of today's top stories on Today as It Happened. Welcome back to Today as It Happened, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. Let's pick up where we left off. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee announced today that it will seek to hold former President Bill Clinton in contempt of Congress. This after he failed to appear for a deposition as part of the panel's probe into the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nate Reed is live for us on the Hill. And Nate, we know that the president didn't show up today, so what happens next?
Well, look, Andrew, it was kind of a made for the cameras moment up here on Capitol Hill where lawmakers were expected to meet with Bill and Hillary Clinton behind closed doors, something that the committee has been trying to negotiate for months now with the Clintons' legal team. Bill Clinton has previously kind of taken a tough line on these Epstein files. He urged the Department of Justice to release everything they had, including files that involve him just a couple of months ago after it appeared that the kind of first tranche of documents released as part of the Epstein Files Transparency Act appeared to have a lot more of Bill Clinton in them than, of course, President Donald Trump. So, again, a lot of questions about the Clintons' decision to not engage here. They did respond quite strongly in a letter both personally sent to the chairman, James Comer, and to committee staff from their attorneys. But I want to note what the chairman of the House Oversight Committee outlined as next steps and his view of the situation in the moments after it became clear the Clintons were not showing up.
We've communicated with President Clinton's legal team for months now, giving them opportunity after opportunity to come in, to give us a date, and they continue to delay to the point where we had no idea whether they're going to show up today or not. I think it's very disappointing. As a result of Bill Clinton not showing up for his lawful subpoena, which again was voted on unanimously by the committee in a bipartisan manner, we will move next week in the House Oversight Committee markup to hold former President Clinton in contempt of Congress.
And I want to read a statement right now, a letter, from lawyers for Bill and Hillary Clinton sent to the committee today. It says, quote, "It is clear the subpoenas themselves and any subsequent attempt to enforce them are nothing more than a ploy to attempt to embarrass political rivals as President Trump has directed. The subpoenas issued to the President and Secretary Clinton are invalid and legally unenforceable." Now, to be clear, that letter says multiple times the various legal reasoning why the Clintons' legal team believe that those subpoenas are completely invalid. They also wrote in a separate letter to the chairman of the Oversight Committee, James Comer, making clear that they believe that Chairman Comer is going to mislead Americans about what's at stake and furthermore possibly misconstrue testimony that they would give the committee. They've offered to work with the Oversight Committee in other means without doing this closed-door deposition. But at the same time, as you just heard there from the chairman of the committee, that certainly will not be enough. So this is kind of a legal battle which could unfold. There's the question of the contempt of Congress proceedings, whether they could actually refer to the Department of Justice contempt of Congress charges against the president and the former Secretary of State. That being said, it would probably be up to the full House to approve those as well. And ultimately, if they do, it'll be up to the Department of Justice and Attorney General Pam Bondi whether to charge the Clintons. But look, with an extremely slim majority in the House of Representatives, Republicans have a number of absences right now. There's a lot of questions about whether they could really successfully charge Bill and Hillary Clinton with contempt of Congress. And again, it would be up to the Department of Justice to follow through on that. We've seen a very similar situation, or somewhat similar situation, back when Democrats held power just after January 6th. They held a number of former Trump officials, and Trump advisors in contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with congressional subpoenas.
Yeah, Scripps News congressional correspondent Nate Reed for us up on Capitol Hill. Nate, thank you for that update.
The first major trial about alleged sexual assaults against Uber drivers is set to begin in Arizona today. More than 3,000 women suing. They claim the company failed to properly vet its drivers. Today's case involves a passenger by the name of Jaylyn Dean. She says Uber knew about a wave of sexual assaults committed by its drivers, but failed to take any basic actions to improve the safety. The trial is the first of 6 test cases. The BBC wants President Trump's defamation suit tossed. Trump filing that $10 billion lawsuit last month. It involves a documentary with edited clips of his January 6th speech. That edit made it appear that Trump told the protesters to walk to the Capitol and, quote, fight like hell. The BBC says the documentary was not produced or aired in Florida, so therefore the state has no jurisdiction. It also says Trump can't prove the documentary caused him any harm. Inflation higher than expected in December. Consumer prices rising 2.7% last month. That's slightly more than economists were expecting. Analysts say inflation is still making it harder for more and more of you to afford stuff. The Supreme Court tackling the heated debate over whether transgender girls should be able to participate in girls' and women's sports. Now, the case could have massive implications for an estimated 122,000 transgender teens who participate in high school sports in this country. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Eva Joy Burnett is live in our D.C. newsroom. And Eva Joy, this is one of the most closely watched cases this term. Why this case and why now?
Hey there, Del. Well, this is something that has really garnered a lot of political attention. It's divided politicians and even Americans. There are polls that show the division in this. And there are actually 2 cases here, one out of Idaho and another out of West Virginia. And in these cases, you have transgender women who want to be able to play on certain teams. In the Idaho case, there's a transgender woman who wanted to be able to play on her team at college. And then in West Virginia, there's a transgender girl who's fighting a law in her state that prohibits her from being on her high school track and field team. What the justices will have to consider here is whether it's discriminatory, these laws in these states that prohibit transgender people from playing on these female teams, specifically transgender girls, people who were born as boys and then went through a transition, and then now they're playing on these female athletic teams. What the attorneys in states that want to enact these laws are argued in front of the U.S. Supreme Court today, is that people who are born as boys and then transition into becoming girls, they have an unfair advantage. They may be taller, they may be stronger. But on the flip side of this, what we heard from attorneys who are representing these plaintiffs is that many transgender women and girls, they go through hormone therapy, gene therapy, even before they hit puberty. So they do not have an unfair advantage. And these arguments, they went for a really long time. They lasted for just about 3.5 hours. They just wrapped up. And it appears as if the justices were grappling with this issue here, the science. Do we have enough information on the science in this matter? And there are some justices, for example, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, we know that he is a coach of young people's sports, and he really grappled with this issue of whether people should not be allowed to continue to play on athletic teams. So what these justices will have to do at this moment is parse through all of these details, all of these arguments. We heard arguments not only from attorneys for those individual states, but also from the U.S. government arguing on the side of preventing transgender girls and women from playing in these teams, on these female teams. So, Del, this really is a tough decision that the justices will really have to go through all the details before we get an answer from them.
And Avajoy, tell us about the two plaintiffs in this case, and actually why one of them actually wants to withdraw their case, have their name removed.
Yes, that was an issue that came up earlier today. So let's start out with a teenager, first of all, from West Virginia. She is someone who still has her case going here at the U.S. Supreme Court. She's actually here in Washington, D.C. There are images of her that popped up outside of the U.S. Supreme Court on Sunday. You see the images right there. She is a 15-year-old transgender girl from West Virginia. She is identified as a girl since she was 8 years old, and she wants to be able to continue her track and field, being a part of the track and field team on her high school. So she wants to push the U.S. Supreme Court to allow the state of West Virginia to allow transgender young people to continue to play on these female teams. But then there's also this other case in Idaho, which I mentioned. This has to do with a college student. She, at this moment, is 25 years old. And when Idaho became the first in the nation to enact a law banning transgender women from being part of female sports, she sued the state because she wanted to be able to play on her college soccer team. She ultimately did not make that team. She continued to play in club sports. And at this point, Del, she tried to withdraw her case from the U.S. Supreme Court. They believe it's now an issue that is no longer relevant. So that's yet another issue that the U.S. Supreme Court will have to grapple with, whether they should make a decision in that Idaho case, especially because the lady in that case no longer wants to move forward, Del.
And history will record her name as part of that case unless something is done. Scripps News Legal Affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett for us live in our D.C. newsroom. Avajoy, as always, we thank you very much.
Straight ahead on Today As It Happened.
It's very, very sad because we don't know if they're alive, what's going on. And not only has there been a blackout for almost a week, but the other thing is they've turned off the electricity, and it's in the middle of winter over there. I mean, the winters are pretty brutal.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Andrew Rafferty. Let's jump right back into our rundown of our top stories of the day.
President Trump telling protesters in Iran to keep protesting, saying help is on the way. The demonstrations beginning a little over 2 weeks ago. Protesters are angry over Iran's ailing economy. There are also reports that more than 10,000 people are being detained. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York. She's gathering reaction from Iranian Americans. And Alex, you've been speaking to people who have loved ones on the ground there. What are they telling you?
Well, they haven't heard from their loved ones in at least the last couple of days since the internet blackout happened on the ground there. But before then, they said it was chaos and devastation across the board as their loved ones described to them the protests and really the brutality in which the regime is responding. I spoke to one woman who lives in Los Angeles. She's Iranian American and lived part of her childhood there. Listen to what she told me about hearing from her loved ones who are still there.
It's very, very sad because we don't know if they're alive, what's going on. And not only has there been a blackout for almost a week, but the other thing is they've turned off the electricity, and it's in the middle of winter over there. I mean, the winters are pretty brutal. And so for many people, there's elderly, everything, and they don't even have electricity for how many days now.
And Del, as you mentioned, the reports now are somewhere in the 2,000 number of how many protesters have been killed. But there are also reports coming out that are much higher than that. Obviously, we're not seeing the full picture yet because there aren't journalists on the ground in the same way in Iran as we're used to seeing. There are reports and images that we've seen of bodies stacked on top of each other. It's not just the protests that are in Tehran where a lot of this began, but they are happening in some of the small villages as well. So people all across the country. There are 92 million people living in Iran right now are impacted. It's not just in the big cities.
And Alex, the president has threatened, i.e. promised involvement, and is now urging protesters to continue taking to the streets. How will that play out, and do they want the United States to get involved?
You know what's interesting is I spoke with Jasmine, and I also spoke with this other man who you are going to hear from in just a second, who is an expert in this field. Both of them had an interesting reaction to Trump's Truth Social post earlier today. I want to pull that up for you, where he encouraged the protesters to remain in the streets, saying that they should stay there and continue protesting. He said, save the names of the killers and abusers, that they're going to pay a big price, and that he's canceled these meetings with the officials until the killing of protesters stops. Even goes as far as to say, make Iran great again. I thought that they would have been thrilled with this reaction, but listen to what they had to say about it.
If there's a plan to help them, right? If we are calling on protesters to go into the streets and they're being massacred and there's no assistance provided to them, I think that is irresponsible. I would never urge anybody in Iran to go into the streets without some sort of plan, and with the expectation that some sort of support is coming. We can't just sit from the comfort of our own homes and urge people to go into the streets.
I'm really disappointed with this kind of post. I know that politics is very complicated. I really don't know what's going on, obviously, behind the scenes. But for more than 2 weeks, the people have been going out in the streets with no weapons, with sticks and stones, and these other people are coming against them with machine guns.
And while they are frustrated, Del, that this is the response that we're seeing, they do want to see U.S. involvement in this. They do not want to see the U.S. or other countries sit aside and watch all of this unfold, because they say that simply the Iranian people just don't have the manpower to fight their own regime. And Ali Reza, who you just heard from, gave a couple of ideas into what he thinks could happen. Listen to what he said.
I think one important thing the U.S. could do is help restore communications in Iran. The internet is shut down right now. The regime's ability to shut down the internet and kill people is crucial to its survival. And so the U.S. can prevent the regime from doing that. There are other options as well. President Trump just today stated that he was considering serious military action, from what I saw in his post. And so, the U.S. can conduct decapitations, strikes, disrupt command and control, go after commanders who are killing innocent protesters.
And there is discussion that there could be negotiations with the IRGC. Ali Reza Nader says that would be something that would be a stain on the president's legacy.
Yes, and a lot of older people remember what happened the last time the United States got involved. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller live for us in New York City. Alex, as always, we thank you.
And coming up on Today As It Happened.
Today, if you announce great numbers, they raise interest rates to try and kill it. So you can never really have the kind of rally you should have.
Senate Democrats demanding answers about fundraising from President Trump's White House ballroom. Senator Elizabeth Warren wants to know how much money has been raised and whether the donors will get special access. The Trust for the National Mall is managing those donations. Right now, the price tag is about $400 million. Major donors include Amazon and Google and Lockheed Martin. All of those companies, by the way, holding billions of dollars in government contracts. The president saying the money keeps pouring in and he'd make the ballroom bigger if he could. A former Navy sailor was sentenced to more than 16 years in prison for selling military secrets to China. Chen Jiawai, selling about 60 technical manuals about a Navy ship to Chinese intelligence, sold them for more than $12,000. He's 25 years old. He shared photos of the ship and the details about its weapons and its location, and then apologized to the judge, saying loneliness clouded his judgment. Wai is one of two sailors charged with providing sensitive military information to China. The other sentenced to more than 2 years back in 2024. A strange split-screen moment on live TV, the president touting his economic successes in Michigan, and as he spoke, the stock market went in the opposite direction, down at one point more than 400 points. Poll after poll showing Americans are concerned about their bottom lines, and the president's approval rating seemed to mirror the market. He even noted that strange split-screen moment speaking to the Detroit Economic Club. Scripps News business and tech correspondent Mara Barrett joins us live now. And Mara, the president once again dismissing the issue, though, of affordability, once again calling it a fake word conjured up by Democrats, but it was a rambling speech. He would say it was the weave. Did he spin a good economic message?
Well, that was the focus heading into this, right? And as you noted, the speech was very meandering, from the economy to defense to foreign relations to tariffs to a mention of wildlife at one point. And so he did focus in on some of the points that he wanted to make about the economy, as well as your point about continuing to call affordability a hoax. But he specifically touted commitments for investments from Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis that his administration has secured, along with low gas prices and his new initiatives to ban investors from buying up housing, as well as investing in mortgage bonds, and his announcement to try to cap credit card interest rates. Those final three agenda items that I just mentioned, though, interestingly, have been popular among progressive in recent years. So even though he's calling affordability a fake word or a hoax, he's clearly understanding that there is some sort of issue, despite him touting his economy as the highest growth and the best economy we've ever seen, which obviously is not how we're seeing so many Americans feel the complete opposite. He also lamented about interest rates and acknowledged his continued tension with Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. I want to hear just a small portion of his speech today.
Today, if you announce great numbers, they raise interest rates to try and kill it. So you can never really have the kind of rally you should have. You announce unbelievable numbers and the market goes down because they know you're going to do everything possible. In the Fed, we have a real stiff in the Fed, but that's for another day. But they raise rates. When there's good news, the market should go up, not go down. Does that make sense to everybody?
Now, to be clear, the Federal Reserve has not raised rates during Trump's current term. They actually haven't raised rates since 2023. But if we want to put this into broader context economically to address his other claims, despite the president's self-described favorite word being tariffs, economists heavily warn that tariffs are inflationary, and inflation, as we've seen, has remained pretty persistent. Prices are largely up year over year, though the inflation report we saw today did remain relatively steady. So that is good news, but follows a sharp history in the recent year with issues with inflation. Now, job growth has also slowed sharply in 2025. It's actually been the slowest net job creation since the pandemic era, so that's pretty telling. And then manufacturing jobs specifically nationally have been declining, even though the administration likes to point to all of these gains. And that was kind of the context of the tour the president took today at the manufacturing plant, being in Michigan. Now, Ford, in tandem with the president's visit today, did announce that they're adding 1,200 jobs in Dearborn, Michigan. They're also adding production in Tennessee. But it's important context to note that this is all coming shortly after the company announced it's canceling its EV truck production, which just a year and a half ago they had invested billions of dollars in. So they're completely shuttering that and potentially reallocating some of those employees back to the gas-powered assembly line.
Thank you for spending some of your evening with Today As It Happened. I'm Andrew Rafferty. Have an excellent Tuesday night.